Most people don't fail because they're stupid, uneducated, or unlucky. They fail because their minds are running on autopilot. From the second you wake up, your brain is making decisions for you. What to ignore, what to react to, what to fear, what to chase. Hundreds of choices, every single day. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If you've never trained your mind, your decisions aren't really decisions. They're reactions, habits, emotional shortcuts. That's why some people always feel behind, confused, or overwhelmed, while others stay calm, think clearly, and move ahead effortlessly. The difference isn't talent. It's not intelligence. It's not luck. The difference is how they think under pressure. Some people have learned to pause, analyze, and act strategically. Others are trapped in reactive thinking that keeps repeating the same mistakes. Different day, same outcome. And here's the good news. Strategic thinking is not a gift. It's a skill that can be trained, a skill that can be rewired, a skill that changes how you see problems forever. In this audiobook, you'll learn how to break free from emotional decision-making, identify the hidden mental traps controlling your behavior, and build the kind of clear, strategic mindset used by elite performers, leaders, and high-level thinkers. This isn't about becoming smarter. It's about becoming dangerously intentional. By the end, challenges won't intimidate you, pressure won't control you, and decisions will no longer drain your energy, because you'll finally know how to think before you react. Chapter 1. Why most minds lose before the game begins. Most people don't lose in life because they lack intelligence. They lose because their mind reacts faster than it thinks. Let that sink in. Every day, situations appear. A comment, a setback, a decision, a conflict, and before logic even enters the room, emotion has already taken the wheel. This is where most lives quietly collapse, not because of one big mistake, but because of thousands of small, automatic reactions. Strategic individuals understand something most people never learn. Your mind has default settings, and those settings were never designed for success. They were designed for survival. Your brain evolved to respond quickly, not correctly, to react, not to analyze, to protect, not to optimize. That's the problem. In a modern world filled with complexity, speed without direction is dangerous, and reaction without strategy is expensive. Every impulsive response has a cost. Every unexamined decision compounds. Every emotional shortcut limits your future. This is why two people can face the same situation and walk away with completely different outcomes. One reacts. The other positions. One responds emotionally. The other responds strategically. And the gap between them grows wider every year. Strategic intelligence is not about being clever. It's about being deliberate. It is the ability to pause when others rush, to see structure when others see noise, to think in layers instead of moments. Most people play life one move at a time. Strategic thinkers play sequences. They don't ask, what do I feel like doing right now? They ask, where does this lead? That shift changes everything. The foundation of strategic intelligence begins with one hard truth. Your first thought is usually wrong. Your first emotion is almost never helpful. This doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. But remaining reactive makes you predictable. And predictability is vulnerability. Strategic thinkers train themselves to step back from the immediate moment. They don't deny emotion. They delay obedience to it. This is the key. Instead of asking, how do I fix this problem? They ask, what system produced this problem? Because outcomes don't exist in isolation. They are the result of patterns. Most people fight symptoms. Strategic thinkers diagnose structures. A failed relationship is not just about arguments. A career plateau is not just about effort. A financial struggle is not just about income. These are surface signals. Underneath them are feedback loops, habits, incentives, delayed consequences. When you learn to see systems, chaos becomes information. The second shift is learning to think beyond the present moment. Reactive minds live in the now. Strategic minds live across timelines. They understand that the most important effects of a decision rarely show up immediately. They appear later, quietly, relentlessly. This is why reactive people chase short-term relief and long-term regret, and why strategic people accept short-term discomfort for long-term dominance. They are not patient by personality. They are patient by design. They ask different questions. If I repeat this choice for 5 years, who does it turn me into? If I avoid this discomfort today, what problem does it create tomorrow? Most people don't zoom out. They zoom in emotionally. Strategic intelligence also requires abandoning certainty. The reactive mind wants guarantees. The strategic mind works with probabilities. Life does not reward those who need certainty. It rewards those who can operate in uncertainty without panic. Instead of asking, will this work? Strategic thinkers ask, what are the possible outcomes, and how do I position myself to win across most of them? This mindset removes fear, because fear thrives on false absolutes. Nothing is all or nothing. Nothing is guaranteed. And that's not a weakness. That's leverage. Which brings us to the final foundation. Not all actions are equal. Reactive people spread their energy everywhere. Strategic people search for leverage. They look for the few decisions, habits, and moves that create disproportionate results. They think less, but think better. They understand that effort is cheap. Direction is expensive. One high-leverage decision can outperform 1,000 reactive actions. This is why strategic people often appear calm. They are not doing more. They are doing what matters. But none of this works unless you change how you think about thinking. Most people are trapped inside their thoughts. Strategic thinkers observe them. They notice when emotion hijacks logic. They notice when bias narrows perspective. They notice when ego demands certainty. This awareness is power. It creates space between stimulus and response. And in that space, choice lives. You don't need to be smarter. You need to be more intentional. Strategic intelligence is not talent. It is training. And training begins with one discipline. Stop reacting. Start observing. Because the moment you stop reacting automatically, you stop losing automatically. In the next chapter, we'll explain why your brain fights this process and how to adjust it so that strategy becomes your default, not the exception. Chapter 2, Escaping the Mental Loop That Keeps You Average. Most people don't think. They repeat. They wake up, react to the same triggers, use the same mental patterns, make the same decisions, and then wonder why nothing changes. This isn't because they're weak. It's because their brain is running on autopilot. Your brain is not designed to help you win. It's designed to help you conserve energy. That's the uncomfortable truth. The human brain burns massive amounts of fuel, so it looks for shortcuts, patterns, habits, automatic responses. This is efficient for survival. It is disastrous for growth. Autopilot thinking is what allows you to drive home without remembering the road. But it's also what causes you to repeat the same mistakes in relationships, career, and life. And the most dangerous part? You don't feel stupid when you're on autopilot. You feel certain. Autopilot number 1. Familiar patterns, wrong context. When something happens, your brain asks one question. Have I seen this before? If the answer feels like yes, it applies an old solution, even if the situation is completely different. This is why people who succeeded once often fail later. They keep using outdated strategies in a changed environment. Markets shift, people change, power dynamics evolve. But autopilot keeps recycling yesterday's thinking. This is not intelligence. This is mental inertia. Autopilot number 2, emotional takeover. When pressure hits, thinking drops. Stress doesn't sharpen your mind. It narrows it. Your body floods with chemicals meant for physical danger. Heart rate rises. Attention collapses. Logic shuts down. This is why people say things they regret. Send emails they can't undo. Make permanent decisions based on temporary emotion. The moment emotion spikes, strategy disappears. And here's the key. Your emotions are fast. Your thinking is slow. If you don't interrupt the process, emotion always wins. Autopilot number 3. Comfort over progress. The brain prefers familiar pain over unfamiliar improvement. That's why people stay in jobs they hate, relationships that drain them, identities that limit them. New thinking costs energy. Old thinking feels safe. Autopilot trades potential for predictability, and it will keep you there forever unless you interrupt it. How you break the autopilot. This is where real control begins. Not motivation, not inspiration. Control. The first step is trigger awareness. You don't need to monitor every thought. You only need to notice the moments when autopilot activates. Common triggers include strong emotional reactions, feeling rushed or pressured, repeating phrases like, "This always happens," avoiding decisions that matter. When you notice these signals, pause. This pause is power. Step 1, external perspective. Instead of asking, "What do I think about this?" ask, "What usually happens in situations like this?" This removes ego from the equation. It replaces emotion with data. You stop being the main character. You become the analyst. Step 2, reverse the outcome. Assume failure. Imagine this decision goes wrong. Completely wrong. Then ask, what caused it? This exposes blind spots your optimism hides. Most people plan for success. Strategic thinkers plan against failure. Step 3, argue against yourself. When you feel confident, that's when you're most vulnerable. Force yourself to defend the opposite position, not casually. Seriously, if your idea survives attack, it's stronger. If it collapses, you just save yourself damage. This is not doubt. This is discipline. Step 4, emotional reframing. Events don't control you. Interpretations do. When you label something as a threat, your brain panics. When you label it as a problem to solve, your brain engages. Same situation, different response. This is the key. Step 5, time distance. Ask one question. Will this matter in 5 years? Most emotional reactions die under time. Urgency is often illusion. Perspective dissolves panic. The real enemy, thinking you're immune. The most dangerous bias is believing you don't have biases. Everyone does, especially confident people. The goal is not perfect thinking. The goal is controlled thinking. You don't eliminate autopilot once. You override it repeatedly. This is training. This is conditioning. This is discipline. Closing the chapter. Autopilot is comfortable. It is familiar. It is safe. And it will keep you exactly where you are. Strategic control begins when you interrupt automatic reactions and choose deliberate thought. Not once, but consistently. Because the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your decisions. And the quality of your decisions is determined by how often you escape autopilot. You've learned how the trap works. Now it's time to build control. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper into how elite thinkers structure their minds to operate on entirely different levels of awareness. Chapter 3, the architecture of strategic thinking. Most people think thinking is natural. It's not. Thinking is a skill. And like any skill, most people never train it. They react. They assume. They jump to conclusions. And they call that thinking. Strategic thinkers are different. They don't just have thoughts. They design how they think. This chapter is about structure. Because without structure, your mind is chaos. Why most thinking is shallow. Your brain prefers speed over accuracy. Fast conclusions feel powerful. They feel confident. They feel right. But speed is not intelligence. Speed is habit. Strategic thinking is slower, quieter, more deliberate. And that's why most people never do it. They mistake calm for weakness. They mistake patience for indecision. They mistake silence for ignorance. They're wrong. Layer 1. From opinions to frameworks. Most people think in opinions. I feel like this is wrong. I think this is a bad idea. I just don't trust it. Strategic thinkers think in frameworks. They ask, what variables are involved? What forces are interacting? What changes if one element shifts? An opinion reacts. A framework analyzes. This is the first upgrade. Instead of asking, what do I think? You ask, what system am I operating in? Business, relationships, power, negotiation. All of them are systems. If you don't see the system, you become controlled by it. Layer 2, separating signal from noise. Most people drown in information. They consume more, scroll more, react more. Strategic thinkers filter. They ask, what actually matters? What is just emotional noise? What changes outcomes? Urgency is often fake. Drama is rarely useful. Volume is not importance. This is the key. If everything feels important, nothing is. Strategic thinkers reduce complexity. They don't add to it. Layer 3, thinking in second and third order effects. Average thinkers stop at first consequences. If I say this, they'll be upset. If I do this, I'll get results. Strategic thinkers go further. They ask, and then what? What does this create over time? What behavior does this reinforce? One reaction can shape a reputation. One response can define a relationship. One decision can lock in a future. Short-term relief often creates long-term problems. Strategic thinkers tolerate short-term discomfort to protect long-term positioning. Layer 4, emotional distance as a weapon. Emotion narrows perception. Distance expands it. Strategic thinkers don't eliminate emotion. They create space from it. They observe it. Anger becomes data. Fear becomes information. Excitement becomes a signal, not a command. This is not suppression. This is mastery. They feel, but they don't obey. That's power. Layer 5, probability over certainty. Weak thinkers need certainty. They want guarantees. They want to be right. Strategic thinkers operate in probabilities. They ask, what's likely? What's possible? What's the risk range? They don't bet everything on one outcome. They position themselves for multiple futures. This is why they adapt faster. This is why they survive mistakes. They don't cling to being right. They cling to being effective. Layer 6, detachment from ego. Ego destroys strategy. The need to defend. The need to prove. The need to win arguments. Strategic thinkers don't protect identity. They protect position. They can say, I was wrong. I missed that. I need to update my view. That's not weakness. That's precision. Every time you detach from ego, your thinking sharpens. The mental shift that changes everything. Here is the shift. You stop asking, how do I feel about this? And you start asking, what is the smartest move here? Feelings inform. They do not decide. This is discipline. Closing the chapter. Strategic thinking is not talent. It is not intelligence. It is not luck. It is architecture. You build it. You reinforce it. You live inside it. Most people live inside reactions. Strategic thinkers live inside systems. And once you see the structure, you can never unsee it. In the next chapter, we move from thinking control, how to pause emotional reactions in real time, and take back command of your responses. Chapter 4, thinking in frameworks, not reactions. Most people don't lack intelligence. They lack structure. When something unexpected happens, they react emotionally, intuitively, impulsively. Strategic thinkers do something different. They don't just think harder. They think through mental frameworks that simplify complexity and prevent emotional overreaction. A mental framework is not information. It's a lens. It's a way of organizing reality so your brain doesn't panic when situations get complicated. Instead of reacting to noise, you respond to structure. The difference between calm, controlled individuals and reactive ones isn't emotional strength. It's that one group sees situations through models, while the other experiences everything raw and unfiltered. Why mental frameworks create emotional control? When you don't have a framework, every problem feels personal. Every setback feels like failure. Every decision feels overwhelming. Frameworks create distance. They turn emotional situations into analyzable patterns. And distance is the foundation of not reacting. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You ask, what system is this part of? That shift alone changes everything. Framework 1, cause versus trigger. Most people confuse triggers with causes. A trigger is what activates emotion. A cause is what creates a situation. Strategic thinkers always separate the two. Someone disrespects you? That's the trigger. But the cause might be unclear boundaries, incentive structures, repeated tolerance of behavior, or a system that rewards disrespect. When you react to triggers, you stay emotional. When you analyze causes, you regain control. This framework alone eliminates impulsive reactions. Framework 2, short-term relief versus long-term position. Reactive decisions optimize for relief. Strategic decisions optimize for position. Relief feels good now. Position pays later. Yelling might relieve frustration. Silence with leverage builds power. Quitting avoids discomfort. Staying and repositioning creates advantage. Before any decision, strategic thinkers ask, does this improve my position or just my mood? That question shuts down emotional impulses instantly. Framework 3, asymmetry of effort. Not all actions are equal. Some actions require massive effort for small results. Others require small effort for massive impact. Reactive minds work hard everywhere. Strategic minds search for asymmetry. One clear boundary can replace 10 arguments. One system can replace constant motivation. One well-timed silence can outperform hours of explanation. When you see life through asymmetry, you stop overreacting because you stop overworking. Framework 4, optionality over certainty. Most people want certainty. Strategic thinkers want options. Certainty traps you emotionally. Options free you psychologically. When you have only one path, every threat feels fatal. When you have options, pressure disappears. You stop reacting because nothing feels final. Building skills, networks, savings, and flexibility isn't about ambition. It's about emotional stability. Optionality is calmness in physical form. Framework 5, identity before behavior. People try to control reactions at the behavior level. It never lasts. Strategic thinkers work at the identity level. Instead of asking, how do I stop reacting? They ask, what kind of person doesn't need to react? When your identity shifts, behavior follows automatically. You don't control your emotions. You outgrow the need to express them impulsively, building a personal lattice of thinking. No single framework is enough. Power comes from combining them. Before reacting, run the situation through multiple lenses. Is this a trigger or a cause? Does this improve position or just relieve emotion? Is there a higher leverage response? What options does this preserve or destroy? Who would I need to become to handle this effortlessly? When multiple frameworks point toward patience, silence, or restraint, you can trust that response. Why this changes everything. Mental frameworks do one critical thing. They slow the moment between stimulus and response. And in that space, you gain power. Not reacting isn't weakness. It's structured intelligence. When you stop seeing life as chaos and start seeing it as systems, incentives, positions, and probabilities, emotional control becomes natural. You don't suppress reactions. You simply don't need them anymore. Chapter 6. Decision-making under pressure. How to make the right choices when everything is against you. Your life is the sum of your decisions, not your intentions, not your wishes. Your decisions. But here's the hard truth. Most people make the worst decisions of their lives precisely at the most crucial moments, not because of ignorance, but because of pressure, time pressure, the pressure of others' opinions, the pressure of fear of losing, the pressure of, I have to answer now. In these moments, your brain is no longer thinking brain. It's a survival brain. When the pressure is on, your nervous system goes into high alert. Your body doesn't know the difference between a business negotiation and a physical attack. Cortisol and adrenaline are released. Focus narrows. Working memory declines. And strategic thinking is shut down. You go into a reactive mode. And reactiveness is the enemy of good decision-making. Remember this principle. A bad decision under pressure is more dangerous than no decision at all. The first critical skill is training your brain to think under stress, not to eliminate stress, but to work with it. Elite people aren't calm because they're not stressed. They're calm because they're used to stress. It's called stress conditioning. You can do it too. When a skill is critical to you, don't just practice it in relaxed situations. Create your own artificial stress. If you have to make a financial decision, practice it with a timer. If you have to speak, practice it after physical activity. If you have to negotiate, design stressful scenarios. Your brain learns to think while your nervous system is active. This practice builds new neural pathways. The second skill is a predefined decision-making framework. Under pressure, the worst thing to do is to both make a decision and think about how to make it. It drains your energy. Elites have a framework in place. One of the simplest and most effective frameworks is this. 1. Describe the situation, not interpret it. 2. Identify the real goal. 3. Create limited options. 4. Choose one and execute. 5. Be prepared to change. This simple structure prevents two big pitfalls: blind rushing and analysis paralysis. The third skill is to make decisions based on criteria, not emotion. When pressure is high, emotions speak louder than logic, so you don't have to silence them, you have to bypass them. There's a quick tool, the 3 criteria matrix. For each immediate decision, choose just 3 key criteria. Not 5, not 10, 3. For example, risk, return, alignment with long-term goal. Quickly rate each option from 1 to 5. Numbers aren't magic, but they force your mind to be clear. This separates decision from emotion. The fourth skill is thinking in the moment of pressure. Pressure keeps you imprisoned in the now. But many bad decisions have been disasters because they only saw the now. Use the 10-10-10 rule. How will I feel in 10 minutes? What will the impact be in 10 months? What will it cost me in 10 years? Even if the answers are vague, these questions will get the brain out of a reactive mode. Sometimes just that little pause is the difference between a mistake and a smart move. The fifth skill is recognizing real urgency from fake urgency. Not all deadlines are real. Some are just pressure tools. Before you accept a rush, ask, what if I wait an hour? What if I wait a day? Will anything really fall apart? Strategic people know. Buying time is a smart decision in itself. And finally, a crucial principle. When pressed, don't look for the perfect decision. Perfectionism is your enemy. A good enough decision is often better than a decision never made. Identify acceptable minimums. Choose the first option that has them. Move. Refine. Control comes from movement, not obsession. And another important truth. Sometimes the best decision is not to make a decision right away. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. Announce when you're making a decision. Say what information you need. And don't let pressure from others take over your brain. Weak people react. Strong people have a framework. When you learn to make decisions under pressure, circumstances no longer break you. You shape them. And that's where strategic thinking goes from a mental skill to a real advantage in life. Chapter 7. Strategic foresight. How to see what others miss before it happens. Most people react to reality after it hits them. Strategic thinkers move before reality becomes obvious. The difference is not intelligence. It is foresight. Foresight is the ability to detect meaningful signals inside noise. It is a skill of recognizing direction before momentum becomes visible. And it is one of the most unfair advantages a human being can develop. You are not trying to predict the future. You are training yourself to read trajectories. Every major shift, economic, social, technological, personal, leaves traces long before it becomes undeniable. Most people ignore these traces because they are subtle, uncomfortable, or inconvenient. Strategic thinkers lean toward them. They notice patterns while others are distracted by events. Why most people miss patterns? The human brain is reactive by default. It focuses on urgency, novelty, and emotion. Patterns rarely feel urgent. They unfold slowly. They require patience, observation, and delayed gratification. This is why the majority only recognize patterns after they become mainstream. By then, the advantage is gone. Strategic foresight requires a shift in how you pay attention. You must stop asking, what just happened? And start asking, What keeps happening? Events are loud. Patterns are quiet. First principle: patterns live beneath the surface. Surface-level similarities are deceptive. Deep-level structures repeat. Different industries, different eras, different people, but the same forces. Power concentrates. Incentives shape behavior. Fear creates bubbles. Comfort creates decay. Innovation creates instability before progress. When you understand these forces, you stop being surprised. You begin to recognize structural repetition. This is not about memorizing facts. It is about understanding dynamics. Second principle: history is a pattern library. Nothing feels more unique than the present moment. That is the illusion. Every generation believes is facing unprecedented circumstances, and every generation is wrong. History does not repeat exactly, but it reuses the same logic. Different names, different tools, same human behavior. When you study history correctly, you are not collecting stories. You are training your brain to recognize recurring mechanics, power transitions, technological disruption, moral panics, speculative manias, cultural backlash. Once you recognize these patterns, current events lose their mystery. You stop asking, "Why is this happening?" You start saying, "Of course this is happening." Third principle: learn to spot early signals. Strategic advantage comes from leading indicators, not headlines. Headlines describe what already happened. Signals hint at what is forming. Leading indicators are small, early, often ignored changes that precede large shifts. Examples: subtle changes in language before cultural change, talent movement before industry disruption, resource reallocation before strategic pivots, emotional tone before collective behavior shifts. Most people dismiss early signals because they don't feel important yet. Strategic thinkers track them because they don't feel important. Weak signals become strong trends over time. Fourth principle: separate signal from noise. Not everything that changes matters. Not everything that matters changes loudly. Noise is frequent, emotional, and inconsistent. Signals are persistent, directional, and cumulative. The mistake most people make is overreacting to noise and ignoring slow trends. To counter this, ask, is this repeating? Is it spreading? Is it accelerating? Is it connected to incentives or structural forces? If the answer is no, it is probably noise. If the answer is yes, pay attention. Fifth principle: think in scenarios, not predictions. Strategic thinkers do not bet on one future. They prepare for multiple plausible futures. Instead of asking, "What will happen?" ask, "What could happen if these variables continue?" Scenario thinking trains flexibility. It prevents shock. You identify the key variables, the possible directions they could move, the early signs of each outcome. Then you watch reality unfold and adjust. This turns uncertainty into information. Sixth principle: cross-domain pattern transfer. The most powerful insights come from outside your field. Patterns repeat across domains. Networks, feedback loops, threshold effects, contagion, collapse dynamics. What happens in biology often explains markets. What happens in physics explains organizations. What happens in psychology explains politics. When you study only one field, your vision narrows. When you study patterns across fields, your vision sharpens. You stop being trapped by local thinking. Seventh principle: know when patterns break. Patterns are tools, not laws. Every pattern has an expiration date. Technology, regulation, and human behavior can invalidate once reliable structures. Strategic thinkers constantly ask, what assumptions does this pattern rely on? Are those assumptions still true? What would break this pattern? When a pattern stops working, it does not fail loudly. It fails subtly at first. Unexpected outcomes are warnings. Pay attention. The strategic mindset shift. Pattern recognition is not passive observation. It is active interpretation. You are not waiting for clarity. You are building it. This skill compounds over time. The more patterns you recognize, the faster you recognize new ones. Eventually, you stop feeling behind. You stop feeling surprised. You stop feeling reactive. You begin moving early, calmly, deliberately, and that is the real advantage. Strategic foresight is not about knowing the future. It is about being ready before others realize they should be. Chapter 8. Breaking Complexity. Strategic Methods for Solving Difficult Problems. Most problems feel impossible not because they are truly difficult, but because they arrive in your mind as a single, tangled mass. When your brain sees a problem as one giant obstacle, it triggers overwhelm, hesitation, and avoidance. Strategic thinkers solve this by doing something deceptively simple. They dismantle complexity before attempting to solve it. True problem-solving mastery begins with understanding that complexity is rarely intrinsic. It is usually the result of multiple simple elements interacting in ways that aren't immediately visible. When you try to address everything at once, those interactions blur your thinking. When you separate them, clarity emerges, seeing the architecture beneath the problem. Every complex challenge has an underlying structure. Your first task is not to find solutions, but to uncover that structure. Ask yourself, what are the major domains this problem lives in? In a professional challenge, these domains might include strategy, execution, people, resources, external forces, and risk. In a personal challenge, they may involve habits, skills, emotional triggers, environment, time, and social dynamics. Once these domains are identified, examine how they influence one another. Some elements amplify others. Some cancel each other out. Some create feedback loops that reinforce the problem over time. Mapping these relationships often reveals that what looked like one enormous problem is actually several smaller issues linked by a few key connections. Decomposing by action, not description. Another powerful method is to break problems down by what must be done, rather than by what the problem is. This shifts your thinking from abstraction to execution. For every challenge, ask, what inputs are required? What transformations must occur? What outputs define success? Each transformation can then be divided into smaller, concrete actions until every step is clear and actionable. This approach exposes hidden dependencies and reveals which actions truly matter. It also highlights bottlenecks, steps where progress slows or stops entirely if they aren't handled correctly. Separating urgency from importance. Many problems feel overwhelming because they mix different time horizons together. Immediate fires blend with long-term strategy, creating mental chaos. Strategic decomposition separates problems into immediate issues that demand fast action, mid-term challenges that require development and iteration, long-term positioning that shapes future outcomes. By assigning each layer its own timeline and strategy, you avoid overreacting urgency while neglecting deeper causes. Often, short-term problems are symptoms of long-term neglect, and long-term goals fail because immediate constraints were ignored. Identifying the real limiting factor. Not all obstacles matter equally. Progress is almost always limited by one primary constraint at any given time. Until that constraint is addressed, improvements elsewhere produce little impact. This constraint might be time, capital, knowledge, authority, energy, or even a false assumption you accepted without question. Once the dominant constraint is relieved, a new one usually takes its place. Strategic problem solvers continuously identify and address the current limiting factor, instead of spreading effort evenly across everything. Decomposing the human dimension. Complex problems rarely exist in isolation from people. Stakeholders, clients, partners, teams, family members, or even your future self shape outcomes through their incentives, fears, and expectations. List everyone affected by the problem or capable of influencing it. Understand what each party wants, what they resist, and what trade-offs they're willing to accept. Many technically sound solutions fail because they ignore emotional or political realities. Solutions that account for human dynamics tend to succeed even when conditions aren't ideal. Digging beneath symptoms. Surface problems are rarely the real problem. They are signals pointing toward deeper causes. Strategic decomposition means refusing to treat symptoms as final explanations. Repeatedly ask yourself what allowed the problem to appear in the first place. Continue until you reach causes that no longer depend on other causes beneath them. Visual tools like cause and effect mapping can help ensure you don't fixate on the most obvious explanation while missing more influential factors. Understanding dependencies and sequence. Some elements of a problem can be solved independently, others require strict order. Attempting to solve dependent components out of sequence leads to wasted effort and frustration. Map which actions must come first, which can happen in parallel, and which require coordination. Often, early progress in one area unlocks rapid progress elsewhere. What felt like a problem requiring simultaneous effort on all fronts may actually have a clear and efficient sequence. Optimizing the flow of value. Finally, view your problem as a system that produces or destroys value over time. Break it into stages where value is created, transferred, or lost. Identify where effort produces the greatest leverage and where friction erodes results. Strategic solutions optimize the entire flow, not just individual parts. Improving one step at the expense of the whole often makes outcomes worse, not better. Chapter 8. Breaking Complexity. Strategic Methods for Solving Difficult Problems. Most problems feel impossible not because they are truly difficult, but because they arrive in your mind as a single, tangled mass. When your brain sees a problem as one giant obstacle, it triggers overwhelm, hesitation, and avoidance. Strategic thinkers solve this by doing something deceptively simple. They dismantle complexity before attempting to solve it. True problem-solving mastery begins with understanding that complexity is rarely intrinsic. It is usually the result of multiple simple elements interacting in ways that aren't immediately visible. When you try to address everything at once, those interactions blur your thinking. When you separate them, clarity emerges, seeing the architecture beneath the problem. Every complex challenge has an underlying structure. Your first task is not to find solutions, but to uncover that structure. Ask yourself, what are the major domains this problem lives in? In a professional challenge, these domains might include strategy, execution, people, resources, external forces, and risk. In a personal challenge, they may involve habits, skills, emotional triggers, environment, time, and social dynamics. Once these domains are identified, examine how they influence one another. Some elements amplify others. Some cancel each other out. Some create feedback loops that reinforce the problem over time. Mapping these relationships often reveals that what looked like one enormous problem is actually several smaller issues linked by a few key connections. Decomposing by action, not description. Another powerful method is to break problems down by what must be done, rather than by what the problem is. This shifts your thinking from abstraction to execution. For every challenge, ask, what inputs are required? What transformations must occur? What outputs define success? Each transformation can then be divided into smaller, concrete actions until every step is clear and actionable. This approach exposes hidden dependencies and reveals which actions truly matter. It also highlights bottlenecks, steps where progress slows or stops entirely if they aren't handled correctly. Separating urgency from importance. Many problems feel overwhelming because they mix different time horizons together. Immediate fires blend with long-term strategy, creating mental chaos. Strategic decomposition separates problems into immediate issues that demand fast action, mid-term challenges that require development and iteration, long-term positioning that shapes future outcomes. By assigning each layer its own timeline and strategy, you avoid overreacting urgency while neglecting deeper causes. Often, short-term problems are symptoms of long-term neglect, and long-term goals fail because immediate constraints were ignored. Identifying the real limiting factor. Not all obstacles matter equally. Progress is almost always limited by one primary constraint at any given time. Until that constraint is addressed, improvements elsewhere produce little impact. This constraint might be time, capital, knowledge, authority, energy, or even a false assumption you accepted without question. Once the dominant constraint is relieved, a new one usually takes its place. Strategic problem solvers continuously identify and address the current limiting factor instead of spreading effort evenly across everything. Decomposing the human dimension. Complex problems rarely exist in isolation from people. Stakeholders, clients, partners, teams, family members, or even your future self. Shape outcomes through their incentives, fears, and expectations. List everyone affected by the problem or capable of influencing it. Understand what each party wants, what they resist, and what trade-offs they're willing to accept. Many technically sound solutions fail because they ignore emotional or political realities. Solutions that account for human dynamics tend to succeed even when conditions aren't ideal. Digging beneath symptoms. Surface problems are rarely the real problem. They are signals pointing toward deeper causes. Strategic decomposition means refusing to treat symptoms as final explanations. Repeatedly ask yourself what allowed the problem to appear in the first place. Continue until you reach causes that no longer depend on other causes beneath them. Visual tools like cause and effect mapping can help ensure you don't fixate on the most obvious explanation while missing more influential factors. Understanding dependencies and sequence. Some elements of a problem can be solved independently. Others require strict order. Attempting to solve dependent components out of sequence leads to wasted effort and frustration. Map which actions must come first, which can happen in parallel, and which require coordination. Often, early progress in one area unlocks rapid progress elsewhere. What felt like a problem requiring simultaneous effort on all fronts may actually have a clear and efficient sequence. Optimizing the flow of value. Finally, view your problem as a system that produces, or destroys, value over time. Break into stages where value is created, transferred, or lost. Identify where effort produces the greatest leverage and where friction erodes results. Strategic solutions optimize the entire flow, not just individual parts. Improving one step at the expense of the whole often makes outcomes worse, not better. Chapter 9. Emotional Intelligence, the missing link in strategic thinking. Strategic thinking is not just a product of cold, calculating logic. Humans make decisions, act, and react, and emotions are an integral part of this process. Emotions, if ignored, undermine decisions from within, and if left unchecked, they distort the course of thought. The real skill is integrating emotional intelligence with rational analysis, not choosing one over the other. Emotional intelligence in strategic thinking is based on four main pillars: emotional awareness, emotion regulation, understanding the emotions of others, and relationship management. Each of these skills provides a strategic mind with a layer of information that logic alone cannot uncover. Emotional awareness, listening to inner signals. Emotions are not random or intrusive. They are compressed messages from our experience, values, and unconscious memory. Anxiety can be a warning of hidden risk. Passion may signal a decision's alignment with our deepest identity. Anger or frustration often signals a conflict between our current path and our true goals. Strategic thinking matures when we translate emotions rather than suppress them. Every strong emotional reaction is an opportunity to ask, what does this emotion see that the rational mind hasn't yet reached? What hidden assumptions or unspoken concerns are surfacing? Emotion regulation, managing your state of mind for better decisions. Emotion management doesn't mean being emotionless. It means maintaining a state of mind in which emotions help make decisions rather than paralyzing or distorting them. Pressure, stress, and high emotions directly affect memory, creativity, and risk assessment. Emotion regulation is a tool for cognitive performance. Mental reframing is one of the most powerful techniques. Failure can be seen as learning data, not identity threats. Competition can be seen as a measure of growth, not a threat to extinction. Simple physical tools such as conscious breathing, muscle relaxation, and mindfulness can also help shift the nervous system from a reactive to an analytical state. Shifting your time horizon is also key. When the mind is caught up in the pressure of the moment, expanding your perspective into the distant future can reduce the intensity of your emotional response and restore strategic vision. Social awareness, reading the hidden layers of others' behavior. Others don't just communicate with words. Their emotions provide valuable information about their priorities, fears, and red lines. The ability to recognize the inconsistency between words and feelings is a key skill in anticipating reactions. In groups and organizations, collective emotions play a decisive role. Passion, anxiety, distrust, or lethargy all affect the quality of collective decision-making. The conscious strategist adjusts the timing and presentation of ideas to the emotional state of the environment rather than fighting it. Relationship management, strategy in human world. Many strategies that sound good on paper fail in practice, not because of a logical flaw, but because they ignore the emotional needs of stakeholders. Trust, empathy, and a sense of being seen are prerequisites for implementing any great decision. Real impact occurs when strategic goals are aligned with human motivations. Security, growth, respect, and meaning are powerful motivators that, if ignored, logic alone will not work. Conflict resolution also often requires addressing emotional layers before engaging in rational negotiation. Emotion as a source of learning. Situations that evoke strong emotions often carry deep lessons. Instead of rushing through them, they can be used as learning laboratories. What triggered this emotion? What value or expectation was violated? What blind spot does this experience reveal? Building emotional learning cycles dramatically accelerates strategic growth. Intuition, the compressed intelligence of the unconscious. Intuition is not magic. It is a result of rapid processing of patterns by a mind that has accumulated experience. Authentic intuition is usually calm, clear, and free from excessive emotion, whereas emotional biases are often tense and hasty. The mature strategic mind neither blindly accepts intuition nor unreasonably rejects it. It tests it, weighs it, and takes it seriously as an early signal in situations of ambiguity. Sometimes intuition senses the future before logical analysis. Chapter 10. Developing Adaptive Intelligence in a World of Constant Change. In a world where the pace of change is outpacing our ability to predict, static intelligence is not only not an advantage, but can become a dangerous weakness. The ways of thinking that made us successful yesterday may be holding us back today. What is valuable in such a world is not the amount of knowledge, but the ability to adapt, rethink, and reinvent the way we think. This ability can be called adaptive intelligence. Adaptive intelligence means being able to quickly abandon dysfunctional mental models, challenge old beliefs, and develop new skills in the face of change. This type of intelligence is built on a fundamental trait: intellectual humility. Intellectual humility means accepting that your current understanding of the world is temporary and can be improved. This does not mean self-doubt or constant doubt. It means you haven't held your beliefs so tightly that they're preventing you from learning. Most people suffer from a kind of cognitive atrophy. They unwittingly accept information that confirms their beliefs and ignore signs that contradict them. Sometimes they continue on a wrong path simply because they've already invested a lot of time, money, or energy into it. Sometimes they see change as more dangerous than staying put simply because the status quo is familiar. Adaptive intelligence is the ability to navigate these traps. One key skill on this path is actively updating beliefs. Most people only change their minds when the evidence becomes completely undeniable, but the adaptive mind reacts much sooner. It takes weak signs, incomplete data, and early signals seriously and corrects course before a crisis occurs. This doesn't mean a momentary change of heart. Rather, it means adjusting your level of confidence to the quality of the evidence. Practicing the skill can be like auditing beliefs. From time to time, review your core beliefs. Why do I believe this? Where did this belief come from? If it's wrong, what evidence might show otherwise? When was the last time I really looked for such evidence? These questions keep your mind active and prevent mental rigidity. The next step in building adaptive intelligence is to diversify your mental models. If you see the world from only one perspective, you'll be surprised when circumstances change. Just as a wise investor diversifies his holdings, a smart thinker diversifies his frames of reference. An economist, a psychologist, a biologist, a historian, and a systems theorist may all be looking at the same problem, but each will see something different. A useful exercise is to deliberately examine a problem from multiple angles. What would the rules be if this were a power game? What would the equilibrium point be if this were a living system? How would the incentives work if this were a market? This shifting between frames often yields insights that one-dimensional thinking never reaches. Scenario-based thinking also plays a role in increasing adaptability. Instead of planning for one possible future, consider several possible futures. Every big decision is based on a set of assumptions. What if one of these assumptions turns out to be wrong? How should you change your strategy? This not only prepares you for different futures, but also reveals blind spots in your thinking. In a fast-paced world, it's not just learning that matters, but the speed at which you learn. If the environment changes faster than you can learn, even the smartest people will fall behind. That's why it's crucial to focus on transferable skills. Skills like critical thinking, pattern recognition, effective communication, and learning to learn. These are assets that don't lose value as technology and markets change. The adaptive mind also relies on rapid experimentation. Rather than treating a strategy as an absolute truth, treat it as a testable hypothesis. Try small, low-cost, reversible versions of your ideas. Get feedback. Modify. This approach both reduces risk and increases the speed of adaptation. One reason people stay on the wrong track is the lack of timely feedback. Therefore, designing smart feedback loops is essential. Many failures are detected late because people wait for final results, while early warning indicators usually appear much earlier. If you know and track these indicators, you can correct course before disaster strikes. Adaptive intelligence, on the other hand, is not just offensive, it can be anti-fragile. That is, it can not only withstand pressure, but also grow stronger from instability. This is possible by creating options, diversity, and support, strategies that can profit in different situations while limiting their losses, systems that do not collapse with a single mistake. No one can adapt to the pace of change today alone. For this reason, networked learning is increasingly important. Connecting with people who have different perspectives, expertise, and experience is like adding new sensors to your brain. You can learn from the trials and mistakes of others without having to repeat them all yourself. Ultimately, the goal of adaptive intelligence is not constant change. The goal is to change in place. Values, principles, and long-term orientations can remain fixed, but methods, tools, and tactics must be fluid. One who understands this distinction is neither a victim of change nor a prisoner of the past. One can forge one's own path in the midst of uncertainty. Season 11. Architecture of Advanced Influence and Sustainable Persuasion in the Complex World. Real influence, unlike the common idea, is not in pressure and not in psychological hidden games. Stable influence is a result of a deep understanding of humans, understanding how human beings think, how they feel, and why they often make decisions that seem irrational. Great strategists instead changing the direct minds of others, situations in which their own people reach better results. Effective persuasion is the art of being homogeneous, not fighting with it. Humans are not logical machines. They are the creatures that are logic, feelings, social identity, fear, hope, and habit of decision-making. Someone who knows this complex network can design messages such as natural, incandidable, and internal. Influence as designing a decision environment. The first advanced penetration principle is, do not convince people. Make an environment that make the right decision easier. Humans are heavily influenced by context. An idea, depending on what space, how compared, and after what experience it provided, can be completely different. Professionals, architects are decision-making spaces. They pave the path instead of pressure. The principle of the pre-renewed reciprocity. Many imagine that the principle of mutual compensation means to thank you later thanks. But in advanced influence, this principle has a deeper meaning. The value of creating no immediate weight. The human mind is heavily sensitive to signs of intentions. When a person feels that the value they received is real, personal, and conscious, psychological transplantation is formed. This link does not fit, but also fit. A small but accurate note is more effective than a big but alone gift. Effective intruders first ask, what does this person or group really need? What means for him, not merely profit? Sometimes this value is information that expands the individual's view, sometimes introducing a key connection, sometimes even heard real. This type of valuation makes the basis of each subsequent request. Identification instead of persuading. Humans defend their identity more than they follow the arguments. If the idea or the image of a person is incompatible with herself, even the strongest regional will also fail. Strategic influence means the idea of presenting the person with accepting it. He feels more not to miss something. Instead of saying, "This is true," the attacker asks, "Were people like you?" What kind of personality is this decision? When deciding to be part of the identity of the individual, the resistance decreases and the commitment increases. Power of small branches and decision chains. A commitment like domino. Humans tend to stay consistent with their previous behaviors because incompatibility threatens their mental image of themselves. Clever influence begins with small, voluntary, and meaningful commitments, not a large and sudden request. When someone gets a little step, his mind is unconsciously fiction. I am the one who confirms this path. Since then, the next steps are easier because the person is protecting their mental story, not answering your request. Framework. Art seeing a reality of an angle. The facts are proven, but the impressions are the policies. The human brain does not process information raw. Interpret them in queens that is unconsciously made. Effective framework means specify what people compare, which consequences are highlighted, which aspects are in the background. This does not deceive. Selection of angle view. In conservative decisions, humans feel more than losing to obtain. In such a situation, showing the do not cost is much more powerful than the profit show doing. Mental lungs and control point of judgment. The first number, the first narrative, the first example can be anchored. The human brain, even when he knows the initial information, is not accurate. It still places the reference point. Professionals know when will the first offer, what criteria will introduce early, what fiction is first heard. When you determine the starting point, the path of judgment is also in the range that moves a design. Modern authority, composition of merit and honesty. Today's authority is no longer just a degree, title, or place. Sustainable authority is made up of 3 elements. Real merit, the ability to easily explain the complexity. Integrity about constraints. Interestingly, confessing to new in areas outside of expertise increases trust, because the human mind is seeking signs of being frightened, not be sure. Satisfy, have detailed predictions, make their mistakes, avoid exaggeration. This combination multiplies the authority of persuasion, real scarcity, and managed time of decision. The scarcity is effective when it is real. The human brain is heavily sensitive to deception, and artificial scarcity destroys trust in the long run. Advanced influence, instead of creating a dummy anxiety, focuses on the cost of opportunity. What if this decision is postponed? What paths may be closed? When a person understands a delay, it is a decision, and that decision is cost energy for action. Social homogeneity, not blindly imitated. Humans look at the behavior of others, but not every other. Similarity is important. Effective influence shows. People like you, in their similar situations, have chosen this path. This message creates cognitive security. If you can show that this pattern is growing, not the decline will tend to join several times. Ethics of influence and strength. Influencing without morality may answer shortly, but ultimately acts against self-influx. The mind of man has a memory. Trust, if broken, is rebuilt. Sustainable penetration is based on 3 ethical principles. 90 transparency. Focus on the long-term interests. When people feel that the final choice is still in their hands, resistance will increase and cooperate. Summing. Influence is an integration. Advanced influence is not skilled with several surface techniques. This ability is a result of psychological maturity, human understanding, and the transparency of intentions. Large intruders are more listener than the speaker. They first understand the man, then design the message. In a world where information is abundant, but rare trust, someone will influence that can make sense, make cognitive security, and convert the choice to normal experience. It is here that the influence, not power tools, but a sign of criminal. Chapter 12. Thinking system and art identify leverage points. Most people, when faced with a problem, is limited to the level of events. They see signs, react, and hopefully resolve by correcting several behaviors or decisions. But in the real world, many stubborn problems remain precisely because their roots are not in the behavior of individuals, but in systems that produce behaviors. System thinking teaches us that if we want to make a lasting change, we must look at structures, relationships, and patterns instead of focusing on individuals. Why do events mislead us? Events are the only tip of the iceberg. A mistake decision, a financial failure, an organizational conflict, or a personal crisis are all events that attract our attention. But these events are usually the consequence of the chains of interactions. When we only react to the event, we have used the best time in temporary housing. The system thinking forces us to go back and ask, what pattern has this happened repeatedly? And then a deeper step, what structure produces this pattern? What is the system, and why is it so powerful? The system is a collection of elements that are connected through specific relationships and act in line with a general purpose or function. Family, organization, economy, human body, and even our minds all systs. The important thing is that the system's behavior is a result of interaction of components with each other, not the functional function of the components independently. For this reason, the change of an element, regardless of its relationship, usually creates an unexpected or unstable result. One of the key features of the systems is phenomenon properties. That is, the features that do not exist in any of the components, but they are interacting. Trust in a team, culture in an organization, or motivation in a person. Examples of these phenomena: feedback rings, hidden engines of behavior. In the heart of each system, feedback circles are located. These circles determine whether a small change is strengthened or neutralized. Excuse the reinforcement circles. Success leads to more resources. More resources increase the likelihood of success, and this cycle continues. The same mechanism can act in negative direction. Stress will make weak decisions. Weak decisions make more problems and increase stress. In contrast, equilibrium rings play the role of brake. They make the system stable. The human body, markets, and many natural processes, with the help of these circles, prevent infinite collapse or growth. In actual systems, these circles simultaneously actively. The art of system thinking is that we recognize which time is the dominant ring. Leverage points, where a small change has a big effect. The leverage points are places in the system that their clever manipulation can create much larger effects of the size of the intervention. Many people spend their energy spent because seeing and changing them is simpler. Change numbers and indicators such as budget, quota, or targeting is the most common type of intervention. These changes may temporarily move behavior, but they remain the main structure. A higher level, the system component changes. Individuals, tools, or technologies. This can be useful, but if the relationships and rules remain the same, the system often adapts itself with new conditions and returns to the previous pattern. Realistic power is apparent when the relationships and flow of information change. Who receives what information is whenever, who is deciding, and who is responsive can transform the entire system behavior. Deeper levels include changing rules, incentives, and strength structures. But the deepest and most powerful point of leverage is to change the mental paradigm. Paradigms, knotted roots of systems. Paradigms are a set of deep beliefs that determine what may seem logical or desirable. Most people are not even aware of their paradigms because the system around them constantly confirms them. When the paradigm changes, the system automatically reorganizes itself. Changing the paradigm in science, economy, business, or personal life can completely transform the future path. For this reason, change is a difficult but superb, powerful paradigm. Unwanted consequences in resistance systems. Sophisticated systems rarely react as we expect. Interventions often activate loops that are not predicted. It is here that system resistance is formed. The system does not respond to hostility, but also to maintain its internal balance. Policies, decisions, and even personal changes are defeated because of the dynamics of the system. System thinking helps us to change instead of fighting the system. Delays, fast-learning enemy. One of the most dangerous features of systems is the delay between action and the result. When feedback comes late, learning is difficult. People often leave or change before seeing the real result of an intervention. This behavior causes chronic problems for many years. System thinking requires patience, long-term vision, and ability to tolerate ambiguity. repetitive patterns of systems. Some structures are repeated over and over again in different fields. Solutions that fail transfer an issue of the problem to the analgesics, and growth along with limitation are examples of these patterns. Understanding these patterns is like having roles that allow you to recognize the problem faster and avoid common traps. Systematic thinking in personal and professional life. System thinking is not only for policymakers or macro managers. Anyone who wants to have a more conscious life can use. Behavioral patterns, habits, relationships, and even our feelings are all within systems that we have made or accepted. When you check your structures instead of blaming yourself or others, you'll get the real power change. This looks for you from reacting to future architecture. Summary. System thinking teaches us that the world is not simple, but understandable. By seeing patterns, recognizing feedback rings, and focusing on lever points can make changes that are stable, deep, and meaningful. Real power is not in more effort, but in a more clever view. Chapter 14. Long-term perspective and strategic planning architecture. Long-term strategic thinking is not an attempt to predict the future, but the art of building movement capacity is in a world that is inherently unpredictable. The future is rarely in accordance with our plans, but people in successful organizations are those who do not miss the direction even when the path changes. They focus on building a compass instead of sticking to detailed but fragile maps. The polarization that works even in May, the storm and change in the playing field. The long-term perspective is the same compass, not a list of numerical goals, nor a dry timetable, but a living picture of being want to become human, what value, and whatever is loyal to. 1. Differences of perspective with traditional targeting. Many people make the perspective confused with the goal. The goal is usually answered by this question: what do you want to get up to? But the perspective answers to: what do I want to live in the long run, make an effect, and decide? Goals can change, remove, or replace, but a healthy perspective, even when goals change, keeps decisions. Someone who does not have a perspective is confused against any new opportunity or unexpected crisis. But someone who has a vision, even when it does not have a detailed answer, knows what not compatible with him. Good perspective. Instead of the path, focus on semantic destination. Rely on identity instead of the number. Instead of controlling the future, it creates preparation for change. 2. The inner roots of perspective, values, meaning, and motivation. Sustainable perspectives are not made from the outside, are extracted from within. They are not the result of imitation of others, social pressure, or success modes. To make a real perspective, you need to access the layers deeper than surface desires. 3 fundamental questions are vital at this stage. What kind of things are you so hard to get to them? What kind of trace, if I remain my life, I feel deep satisfaction? What even if you give me money, power, or credit, I'm not willing to cross myself? These questions may be uncomfortable, but precisely the same as a sign of approaching the nucleus. The perspective that is extracted from this level even produces an inner motive and pressure, incentives that are not dependent on external encouragement. 3. Flexible perspectives, balance between stability and matching. One of the biggest mistakes in long-term planning. Rigid offense is too much vision. The world changes today with a speed that every perspective is completely part of the partner, sooner or later. The strategic perspective should simultaneously identify 2 features: stability in the principles, flexible in directions. Instead, say, I will have exactly this job in the next 10 years. Say, in the next 10 years, I want to be at a point where I have intellectual independence, real influence, and freedom. Such a perspective allows routes to change, tools change, but the decision-making identity is maintained. 4. Scenario thinking, preparation for different future. Modern strategic planning is based on this principle that there is no single future. Instead of trying to guess a probable future, you must prepare yourself for a few possible future. Scenario thinking includes the following steps: identification of key non-generalizations, technology, economics, politics, culture, market. Combining these non-different scenarios. Checking in every scenario. What are the threat? What opportunities are created? Which capabilities remain worthwhile? The purpose of scenario is not predict, increase strategic sensitivity. When your mind is already familiar with several future paths, it will match the faster in the face of real changes. 5. Strategic allocation of sources, focusing instead of dispersion. Time, energy, attention, and capital are limited. The differences between ordinary people with strategic people are not more resources, but also to make their resources more intelligent. Strategic thinking in resource allocation. Detecting activities that have the most long-term effect. Removing or restricting activities that only keep busy. Saying no to good opportunities to stay loyal to great opportunities. Strategic focus is often uncomfortable because it means losing options. But without losing options, no competitive advantage is not built. 6. Constructor of lasting capabilities instead of fleeting skills. In a world where skills are quick to become obsolete, investment is on short-term technical specialties. Intelligent long-term planning plans its focus on capabilities that are valuable in different scenarios. These features include analytical thinking and system, learn quick and self-regulation, the effective relationship and the influence of the word, build and maintain high-quality relationships, deciding in terms of non-compliance. These are not skill, are mental infrastructure. The more powerful infrastructure, the matching with future changes becomes less costly. 7. Risk management on long-term horizon. There is no risky strategy, but there's a big difference between the calculated risk and blind risk. Effective long-term planning does not remove risk. It inhibits. Principles of strategic risk management. Identify catastrophic failures, those who destroy the whole path. Protective shield design for these failures. Create reserves, financial, mental, communication. Keep alternative options. The goal is not to be none of the land. The goal is to not eat equally with removal. 8. Run, review, and continuous evolution. The outlook is fantasy. Run without reviewing is obstinable. Real strategy, live wheels of action, feedback, and modification. For this, divide long-term goals into meaningful milestones. Design indicators that warn more than the final result. Regularly question your assertion. Let the strategy be mature, not frozen. Strategic people are not loyal to their plans, are loyal to learning from the results. 9. Strategic discipline in the population world. The biggest enemy of long-term perspective is not a crisis. The distraction is every day. Messages, requests, instant opportunities, and short-term pressures eat the relaxation of strategic focus. Strategic discipline means conscious protection from thinking time. Limit the bike mental entrances. Making systems that turn you back to long-term path. Successful people are not necessarily incompetent. They design their own environment that make it easier to make decisions. 10. Summer. Stability and direction. Freedom in the path. Long-term strategic planning is not try to control the future. Practice is to make insiders that can also decide in different future. When the orientation is clear, redirect is not threatening. Fail information. And the future is the game field, not anxiety source. The real perspective does not lock you into a rigid copy of yourself. Rather, the capacity of growth changes in effectiveness over time. Chapter 15. Implementation and mastery. Knowledge without. Implementation remains merely intellectual entertainment. The difference between people who understand strategic thinking concepts and people who achieve strategic thinking results lies entirely in their ability to consistently apply these principles in real-world situations. The implementation challenge is that strategic thinking requires overriding many of your brain's default patterns. Your brain evolved for immediate survival in simple environments, not for complex decision-making in uncertain conditions. This means that applying strategic thinking principles requires conscious effort and systematic practice until new thinking patterns become habitual. Start with one principle at a time rather than trying to apply everything simultaneously. Choose the strategic thinking concept that seems most relevant to your current challenges and focus on applying it consistently for several weeks before adding additional principles. Deliberate practice is the key to developing mastery in strategic thinking. This means practicing these principles in increasingly challenging situations where the stakes gradually increase. Start with low-risk decisions where you can experiment with different approaches without serious consequences. Keep a decision journal where you record important decisions, the reasoning, process you used, the principles you applied, and the outcomes that resulted. Review this journal regularly to identify patterns in your thinking and areas where you could improve your approach. Create implementation triggers that remind you to apply strategic thinking principles when they're most needed. These might be specific questions you ask yourself before important decisions, checklists you use for complex problems, or regular review, processes that ensure you're thinking strategically about your priorities. Mental rehearsal accelerates the development of strategic thinking skills. Spend time imagining how you would apply these principles to hypothetical scenarios or past situations where you could have thought more strategically. This mental practice strengthens the neural pathways associated with strategic thinking. Find opportunities to teach these concepts to others. Teaching forces you to understand principles more deeply and provides practice in applying them to different situations. It also creates accountability for your own implementation of these principles. Build strategic thinking into your environment by surrounding yourself with people who think strategically and creating systems that support strategic decision-making. Your environment has enormous influence on your thinking patterns, so design it to reinforce the mental habits you want to develop. Measure progress by tracking the quality of your thinking process rather than just the outcomes of your decisions. Good strategic thinking improves your probability of good outcomes, but it doesn't guarantee them. Focus on whether you're consistently applying sound principles rather than whether every decision works out perfectly. Common implementation obstacles include perfectionism, which causes people to overanalyze decisions instead of taking action; emotional reactivity, which overrides strategic thinking when stress levels rise; and social pressure, which causes people to abandon strategic approaches when others pressure them to act differently. Overcome perfectionism by setting good enough standards for different types of decisions and committing to act once you reach those standards. Most decisions are reversible and can be improved through iteration rather than requiring perfect initial analysis. Manage emotional reactivity by recognizing your emotional triggers and having predetermined responses that help you restore strategic thinking when emotions run high. This might involve taking breaks before important decisions, consulting with trusted advisors, or using breathing techniques to reduce emotional arousal. Handle social opinions you consider when making strategic decisions. Not everyone in your life thinks strategically, and well-meaning advice from people who don't understand strategic thinking can undermine your decision-making quality. The ultimate goal isn't to become someone who thinks strategically sometimes, but to become someone for whom strategic thinking is the natural default approach to important challenges. This transformation happens gradually through consistent practice and application. Strategic thinking mastery is evidenced by several characteristics. You naturally consider multiple time horizons when making decisions. You automatically look for underlying patterns in systems rather than just reacting to surface events. You consistently seek information that might contradict your initial impressions. You approach problems by breaking them down systematically rather than jumping to solutions. You maintain appropriate confidence that's calibrated to the actual uncertainty in different situations. You influence others through understanding their perspectives rather than just asserting your own. You adapt your strategies when conditions change rather than stubbornly persisting with approaches that are no longer working. Most importantly, you take responsibility for the quality of your thinking rather than blaming circumstances when things don't work out as planned. You view every challenge as an opportunity to refine your strategic thinking abilities and every setback as feedback that can improve your future decision-making. The journey towards strategic thinking mastery is ongoing. The world continues to become more complex and fast-changing, which means that the ability to think strategically becomes increasingly valuable over time. The principles you've learned today will serve you throughout your life, but they'll also evolve and deepen as you apply them to new challenges and situations. Your brain now has the tools to outsmart virtually any situation you encounter. The question is whether you'll use them consistently enough to make strategic thinking your natural way of approaching the world. The choice, as always, is yours. The 15th season. Run, dominate, and convert strategic thinking to identity. Knowledge without implementation is just the accumulation of information. The real difference between those who know about strategic thinking and those who live not in the study rate, but also the ability to transform awareness of sustainable action. Effective implementation is where most people stop, not due to mental disability, but due to the inconsistency between and doing. Strategic thinking, contrary to common imagination, is not a purely analytical skill. It is a conscious behavioral pattern that should replace instinctive reactions, hasty decisions, and old habits. The human brain has evolved for survival in simple and immediate environments, not for complex, multi-layered decision-making. For this reason, strategic thinking requires training, order, and design of mental habits, of knowing up to action. One of the biggest mistakes of individuals is that they are trying to implement all the principles simultaneously. This approach is not effective, but causes mental fatigue and release. Real dominance is formed when you focus on a key principle and turn it into part of the behavior of everyday routings. Choose which strategic thinking principle is most likely to affect your life or work. Time management, system thinking, deciding in terms of uncertainty, influence in communication. Practice the same principle for a few weeks, consciously and persistently, to turn from a technique to a mental habit. Targeted practice, the real path of domination. Accidental domination does not occur. The result is a conscious and gradual practice. The exercise that begins with small challenges and enters more pre-irritating situations. The cost decisions are the best practice ground, where you can make an error, learn, and modify. One of the most powerful tools in this direction is the Office of Registration of Decisions. Write in this office: what was the decision? What options did you have? What principles did you use? What did you feel? What was the result? Regular review of these notes reveals hidden patterns of thought, both strengths, both blind spots. Make executive stimuli. The mind returns to default state in pressure. To prevent this, you need to design reminders. The constant questions asking for yourself before important decisions, checklists for complex issues, or weekly browsers that force you to look at the top. For example, what the consequence of the decision has in the next 6 months. If I continue this path, what will the system show? What don't you see? Mental practice and simulation. The mind does not differ significantly between real experience and deep mental experience. The conscious impression of situations strengthens the neurological pathways of strategic thinking. Review past positions and redesign design, or imagining future scenarios. Multiply the speed of learning. Training, the fastest path of domination. When you train something, you will really understand it. Explaining the concepts to others keeps your thinking and keep you accountable against yourself. Training is not necessarily formal. Even deep talks are also enough with friends or colleagues. Strategic design. The environment affects your behavior more than the will. If you are full of acceleration, emotional reactions, and short-term decisions, your mind is drawn to the same side. Choose people who, deep questions ask, don't hurry, are responsible for their thought. Make systems that force you to think, not react. Actual progress criterion. Strategic thinking is not guaranteeing success. Increases the likelihood of success. Instead of obsessing on the outcome, the quality of the process is self-shock. Do you see the options? Challenge your assumptions? Understand the system? If the answer is yes, even failures are part of the progress. Run common barriers. 3 main enemies run. Perfectionism, paralysis of decision-making. Emotional reaction, abduction of control of mind. Social pressure, the destruction of intellectual independence. The solution is not complete. Be good enough. Most decisions can be corrected. Understand the feelings, not to suppress. And that's not all the value of equal weight. Signs of real domination. When strategic thinking turns into your identity. Naturally see some time horizons. You are looking for roots, not signs. Welcome the opposite information. Before the answer, understand the structure of the problem. The trust is proportional to uncertainty. Understand others, not just convinced. Refer the path by changing the conditions. Can't take responsibility for your quality. But not stop. Mastery is not the destination, the permanent path of growth. The world becomes more complex, and the value of strategic thinking every day. Tools change, but they remain deep. Now you are equipped, not to control the world, but to better understand it and make more informed decisions within it. From this point later, the main question is not whether you can think of strategic or not. The question is, are you so continuous doing so to become your second nature? Choosing, as always with you. If you've reached this point, something important has already happened, not because you memorized strategies, frameworks, or principles, but because you stayed. You chose to think instead of skim, to reflect instead of rush. And that choice alone separates you from most people. Strategic thinking is not a badge you earn or a skill you finish learning. It is a way of standing in the world, a way of pausing when others react, a way of seeing patterns where others see chaos, a way of choosing responsibility over excuses, clarity over comfort, and long-term meaning over short-term relief. There will be moments after this book when you forget everything you read. Stress will rise. Emotions will flare. Old habits will return. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. Mastery is not the absence of failure. It is the speed and honesty with which you return to awareness. Remember this. You don't need perfect information to make powerful decisions. You don't need certainty to move forward intelligently. You don't need permission to think differently. What you need is a courage to slow down when the world demands speed, the discipline to question your first instinct, and humility to admit when your thinking needs to evolve. Every meaningful life is built through moments that look ordinary from the outside. A pause before reacting. A question asked instead of an assumption made. A long-term choice taken when a short-term escape was available. These moments don't announce themselves, but over time, they compound into something unmistakable. A life guided, not drifted. The world you are stepping into is more complex, faster, and noisier than ever before. But complexity is not a threat to the strategic mind. It is its natural environment. Where others feel overwhelmed, you now have the tools to orient yourself. Where others blame circumstances, you can examine systems. Where others chase certainty, you can navigate uncertainty with calm intent. This book does not end with answers, because answers expire. It ends with a way of thinking, because that endures. From here on, every challenge you face can become a training ground. Every setback can become data. Every success can become feedback rather than ego. You're no longer just reacting to life. You are participating in it consciously. Close this book slowly. Not because it is finished, but because it has begun its real work inside you. And when the next difficult decision appears, as it inevitably will, pause for a moment and remember, you are not here to predict the future. You are here to think clearly within it. That is more than enough.